So Julie Mason from the Forest Preserve District of Will County is going to talk about killing invasive shrubs, something we all love.
Great, thank you. And I guess first off, can you hear me?
Yep.
Well, first off, let's give Chris and the organizers a hand for giving us this. All right, invasive shrubs, nothing new, right? So I'd like a show of hands here. How many of you are familiar with scenes like the photo up there, where we just have dense thickets of invasive shrubs?
Yeah.
Anyone never seen it? Good. All right. You're in Illinois then. Good thing. So first off, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit broadly, just background in terms of different treatment options. But then more specifically, I'm going to tell you about some testing we've been doing using oil water emulsions for basal bark applications. All right. So just very broadly, as far as treatment options, there's cut stump treatments, yeah? So a version I'm sure many of you are familiar with is cut stack burning, like the photo at left, where somebody uses a chainsaw or a brush saw and physically cuts the shrub, and then people take that and burn the brush in piles and then apply herbicide to the cut stump. Everyone, yes? Mm-hmm. So what's missing from the photo at left there is the 2 to 10 other people that are also involved in this operation. So to clear an area like that typically takes a lot of people and in like a workday situation. There's also mechanical clearing options using like a forestry mower, brush hog, different pieces of equipment to do a similar sort of thing where the machine cuts the stumps and then people follow behind and apply herbicide to the cut stumps. Then there's herbicide-only options. You notice the mechanical options, involve applying herbicide to the cut stump. The reason being, if you don't apply herbicides, the shrubs just resprout. So cutting alone doesn't work. Basal bark options are where you use an oil-based herbicide and apply it to the bottom, 12 inches or so, all the way around the stem, which kills it. And then there's foliar treating options, which are done during the growing season to typically smaller shrubs, or like resprouts, where a water-based solution of herbicides applied to the leaves to kill the shrubs. And all those treatment options have pros and cons, right? So on the cut stacking burning, it's very resource intensive. So I took our past 2 years worth of data for the Will County Forest Preserves. So since 2017, our volunteers, staff, contractors, everybody combined, so basically all of our resources combined, have cleared about 200 acres of invasive shrubs, right? That's a fair amount. But it took 8,500 person hours, or man hours. So that's a fairly resource intensive method. It averages out to 45 hours per acre, according to our data. And like I said, another negative is if they're not herbicided, they just resprout. So that's a lot of effort. If they're just allowed to resprout, you're back in the same situation. But on the plus side, it's like instant gratification. Once you clear something, you can look back at the end of the workday and it looks good. It's cleared. I mean, we're humans. We're big creatures of instant gratification, right? And there's also, at least for the initial application, it tends to minimize herbicide use. So you're only applying herbicide to, a small surface of the stem. In contrast, basal barking is much more efficient. It takes a lot less time and resources. Again, I looked at the past 2 years of our data from our forest preserve system, and we treated over 600 acres using the basal bark method, and it took 1,100 person hours, which averages out to less than 2 hours per acre. Now, it's not exactly a fair comparison, because we tend to basal bark areas that tend not to be quite so thick, and we tend to do cut stump where it tends to be thicker shrubs. But I'd still say, when I looked at comparable areas, it was still a 10-fold difference. So it took 10 times as much time and resources to do cut stump as it did the basal bark. On the minus side of basal barking, up until I guess a couple of years ago, I would have told you that I'd seen inconsistent results. Like sometimes I go back to an area that we basal barked and I'd say, double thumbs up, looks good, the shrubs are dead, everything looks great. Other times I go back and be like, I don't know, those leaves are still on, I think they might pull through, So up until I did the study, I thought that basal barking was potentially, not consistently effective. Another negative is, or potential negative is, you leave the stuff dead standing. So once it's applied, it's still there. So every time you want to go back through and do a prescribed burn, do other management activities, you still have to fight through all those dead rose canes or what have you. So for other management, leaving all that dead standing can be a hindrance sometimes. And at least there's the perception or possibility of it taking more collateral for the initial application, or more herbicide and potential more collateral for the initial herbicide application. So by collateral, what I'm talking about is a lot of times what's in the photo at left there. Let's see if I can do this. There we go. So you see that little bitty bit where there's not green stuff right at the base? Under typical basal bark applications, where the herbicide spray goes, there tends to be a little bit of a dead spot. And that's because the oil in it kills forbs, grasses, all the herbaceous. Although typically it fills in again within a year, so it's not really noticeable after that. But we've had maybe a handful of times in the past couple of years where it's been done over snow cover or when it's rained, like within a day after the application, and that oil's run. And when it runs, it's no bueno, it's not good. So there's a thing, and it ran for like 20 feet down the hillside there. So that was quite significant. So from a collateral standpoint, we've gone to being quite careful about making sure that there's no rain in the forecast, not doing it over snow cover, making sure it's done under proper conditions to avoid situations like the one on the right there. And there's other things you can do to minimize collateral damage, like making sure the spray isn't on the big mist setting, so you go to bigger droplets, so it's more of a stream situation. Keeping the sprayer pressure a little bit on the lower side, again, so you're not spraying out quite so much. Sometimes even we strap paint rollers to the end of the sprayer, use like a fan setting, and you can roller the herbicide on just like you're doing a wall, painting a wall. So there's various options, lots of different sort of takes on this, but there's definitely ways to minimize collateral, and there's good reason to make sure that we minimize collateral on it. But we had some questions about basal barking. Like, first of all, is it effective on all species and sizes? Like I had always thought and always heard that, say, Garland 4 doesn't work on honeysuckle. Common perception, I think. Does it work on all, even those big 4-inch diameter, 5-inch diameter, does it work on those big boys? That was the question. I wanted to try out oil water emulsions. So what I'm talking about here is where into the sprayer tank, we put, the amount of herbicide we're going to put. Say we're using 20% bark oil, put in the bark oil, and then the rest of it is water. And so then we sort of slosh it back and forth in the sprayer. We did it to a count of 30 Mississippis. And then add regular herbicide dye, because now the solution's mostly water, right? So we'd add dye so we could tell where we sprayed. And then just walk around and use it like you normally would a straight oil pack. So we wanted to see if that was just as effective as regular oil. We also wanted to see if it would be possible to lower the concentration of the oil and the herbicide to potentially reduce that collateral damage. We wanted to know, does treatment timing matter? Is spring treatment just as effective as fall treatment, vice versa? And then the last one was, when you read the herbicide label, it always says you have to go 360 degrees all the way around the base of the stem for basal barking. But do you really have to? Like when you're in a big rose thicket, going all the way around the base of that big monster rose takes a lot of time and blood off your shoulder, So is that really important? So those are some of our questions. So what we did was put in test plots. Now this wasn't scientific. We didn't have replicates. We just went and tried them. But we used colored ribbons that were colored. So we treat the shrubs. Then we put these colored ribbons on, and they were color-coded to the treatment type. So we could tell a year later what particular treatment each shrub received. And I think this was also important because if you go out to this area, it's now 2 years later, you'll see invasive shrubs. But when you go to the live ones, if you look close, they don't have ribbons. And a lot of times it's because they were missed, or maybe they were 1 foot tall when we did the treatment. Now it's 2 years later, those things have grown 5 feet. Now they're sticking out like sore thumbs. So I think it was actually a really important thing that we individually marked, which ones were treated and how they were treated. So our treatments. First one we did was 20%, I'm going to call it G4, but really we were running an off-brand called Relegate, same active ingredient as Garland 4, and 80% bark oil. So that's kind of a standard treatment. Second one was an emulsion version of that. We did 20% G4, 20% bark oil, and 60% water. And then we lowered the herbicide from there to see how low we could go. So we did 10% G4, kept at 20% bark oil and 70% water. Then the fourth one was the lowest herbicide concentration was the 5% G4, 20% bark oil, and that one's 75% water. So it's mostly water going out. We did both a fall 2017 and a spring 2018 version of each of those treatments. And then we did 2 different application styles. One was a proper 360-degree application, where the applicator walked all the way around and properly sprayed the base of each of the shrubs. And then the second one was a standing in one place version, where we'd stand in one place and kind of treat as good as we could from keeping our feet right where they were. So we sort of give it the reach around, as good as we could, but without actually physically walking around the whole thing. And I'll say basal bark on this, but the only ones that we were really going up a full 12 inches, like it says to on the label, were like the 3, 4, 5-inch diameter big ones. The rest of them, the multiflora rose and all the little guys, if they were less than, say, 6 feet tall, we're just kind of squirting at the base. So we're getting up, 3 inches or so. So these are the results. 6 months after each of the treatments, all but one of the multiflora rows were dead. So this is even 5% herbicide, even the one-sided applications where you're just standing in one place and squirting at the base, dead as a doornail. So this is, for anyone who has to treat multiflora rows, this is fabulous news, because it's really nice to just be able to sort of stick your wand in there, sort of like this, and spray at the base, and then it just dies. It's wonderful. It was different 6 months later for the honeysuckles and buckthorns and autumn olives. All those other guys, a lot of them leafed out the following spring, or still had leaves for the spring in the fall if it was a spring application. But those leaves, they looked stressed. So they were a little smaller, a little more bluish tinged, a little droopier than the ones that hadn't been treated at all. But they were definitely still alive and definitely still leafed out. However, 1 full year after treatment, all the ones who had been treated with at least 10% G4, and for the bigger ones, they had to have the 360-degree application. But all the ones that got a proper treatment died. So it took them a long time, but it was across the board for every single species we had, it was effective. Yeah, good, huh? Yeah. And then 1 year later, all the multiflora rows were still dead. So the one that had looked stressed initially finally did die. So what I got out of this is that gloriously, the 360-degree application is important for the bigger shrubs, but not important at all for roses and the smaller shrubs. The oil water emulsions were just as effective as the straight oil. We saw absolutely no difference. They all died. The one sort of thing to note, though, is you can't use oil water emulsions when it's below freezing, just because the water freezes. We still saw whether it's the emulsion or the straight oil, we still had some, wherever the spray went, there was a little bit of a dead zone. Like I said, for those big ones, it took a full year to die. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like, you know, how I said cut, stack, burn with instant gratification. This is kind of the opposite of that, where it's like continual worry, you know, until they actually do bite the dust. The treatment timing didn't matter at all. The spring and fall both were equally as effective. Yeah, so that's it. So the next thing that we're thinking about testing out is, can we go with an even lower concentration of oil? I mean, the 20% worked just fine. I'm curious, will 10% be okay? Even 5, you know? And then we had used Impel bark oil, which is a petroleum-based bark oil, and we just bought a vegetable-based one. I'm going to look at the name. I keep thinking LBJ, but that's not it. Hold on. JLB, very different. Okay. So yeah, anyway, we found a brand, and I don't recommend it because we haven't tried it yet, but we found a brand that's a vegetable-based one. So I'm curious to see if it's going to be as effective, A, and then potentially will it have the same collateral, you know, little dead zones. But those are what we're thinking about. So I guess I want to make sure to say thank you to Phil Solatka. He's with a landscape company who gave me the idea to try oil water emulsions in the first place. And then also to Nick Buddy and Jessica Quinn, who helped with the field work. Yep, that's all. Questions? Yes.
For your spring timing, what was the phenology of the plants when you sprayed them in the spring? Was it leaf on, leaf off, expansion?
It was April, and that year they had leafed out, but they weren't fully expanded quite yet.
Great.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, did anyone hear the questions? I forgot I have to repeat it. So he had asked in the spring treatment what the leaf phenology was. So as I recall, they had leafed out, but they weren't fully expanded yet. Yes?
I'm not familiar with G4. What's G4?
Oh, G4 is my shorthand for Garlon 4, which is a triclopyr herbicide.
Okay.
The oil-based.
All right. I have a problem with box elders, and I like to cut them out. But again, next year, shoots all over the place. So what's best for something like this? I like to cut it out and then treat the trunks of the stems.
Yeah, great. Yeah, he wants to have his box elders that he cuts actually die and not resprout. So yeah, some of this particular herbicide, they have one at Home Depot that has triclopyr in it, and I think it's called like brush killer or.
Oh, okay. All right.
Anybody? Yeah, there's if you look on the herbicide label, if you have to go to like a Home Depot or something, look for something with triclopyr as an herbicide additive in it. Yes, ma'am.
Could you put the slide back with the formulas?
Yep. Sure, there you go. Yes, sir.
If you don't have an outlet for Garlon 4 or the triclopyr, 50% glyphosate and water after you cut it, spray the stump.
Sure.
That'll get it.
Yeah, good suggestion. Yes.
The honeysuckle that are waiting that year to, or autumn of whatever, they're waiting that year to die off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, it was leafing out, you mentioned, was it able to produce any berries? Like, did any of them have enough energy to produce berries during that year?
Yeah, so the question is, in the year that they were on their way to death, did any of them produce berries? And I believe yes. Yeah, some of them definitely flowered, and I believe they were able to do some berries in that year. Yep. Yes, sir.
How easily does the bark oil mix with water? Do you constantly have to agitate it, or?
No, yeah, no, it was, the bark oil has an emulsifier in it, and so, yeah, we just sort of did it, you know, our 30 Mississippis of shaking at the beginning, and then just walking around and, you know, stumbling and stuff was enough. Yes, sir?
With cut stump and paint, I swear I'm getting fairy rings around the outside of them, 3 to 3.5 feet out there. There's stuff coming up that's attached to roots when you try and pull it. Did you get anything like that with the basal bark?
We did not get any, his question was about sometimes when you do cut stump, you can have shrubs kind of coming up around it. That's particularly the case for rhizomatous ones like black locust, I'm thinking of. And we didn't have any black locusts in this particular treatment area. But I have basal bark black locusts in the past, and I haven't noticed them sprouting up as much.
This was with honeysuckle.
Oh, you've seen it with
I swear
honeysuckle?
that 3 feet outside it, there's 4 or 5 stumps, 4 or 5 sprouts around the stump from the glyphosate treatment on that. You didn't get any of that with the bark lung?
Nope.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
What about cleaning your tanks? How difficult is it with the bark oil? Like, is it a triple rinse suffice, or what do you do to clean your tanks?
Yeah, we just rinse them out afterwards. It wasn't anything special.
Did you try buckthorn at all?
Yes, buckthorn. Yeah, actually one of our specimen shrubs was like a 5-inch diameter. It was glorious buckthorn. That one,
Just honeysuckle that works really well.
yeah, no, we had honeysuckle, buckthorn, autumn olive, multiflora rose. There was a couple of winged euonymus, and I believe 1 privet for the stuff in our particular section.
The autumn olive works good too.
Yep. Yeah, the one on the left there is a big honeysuckle, and the one on the right's a big autumn olive. Are the dead ones there? Yes, sir.
There's, I don't know his name, we were just looking at the email, but there's a guy at Chusa
Yeah.
that was using basal bark at 15% and having good success.
Oh, yeah.
The same, not even sprayed all the way around the big plants, so.
Yep.
Nothing right for this on Chris.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.